Hello, ladies and gentlemen, it's Mike here at Gamefromscratch, and today we have another update to Visual Studio Code. Yes, the Visual Studio April 2024 upgrade just happened the end of last week, and we're going to jump through what I think are the coolest new updates to Visual Studio Code. By the way, if I mix up Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code through this video, I am referring 100% to Visual Studio Code. Blame Microsoft's naming department for that one, not me. Anyways, we're going to take a look at what the highlight new features of the April release are, and we're going to start with what I think are some of the coolest new ones. First off, let's bring up our command palette, and the first thing you can do is type quick search and then search for whatever you wish, such as, for example, GPU. Or, of course, you could do it quickly and just do a % sign. So you can start your entire project. So again, I'm going to search for GPU. It's going to go through my entire project as it is. You can see the various different results show up here, threaded based off of where they were actually located, and you get a highlight and so on. So you have this rapid quick search. Again, just throw in the % sign, and then whatever you're searching for, it will search through your project. Very cool new feature there. Another one, and this one is a little bit on the smaller scale, but for certain people, it's going to be game-changing. If you're dealing with a Markdown thing, it used to be that if you opened up a Markdown and you wanted to see an image or a video, you'd have to open up a preview of the Markdown. Now what you can actually do is just hover over it. So if it's a video file, it will bring up a preview of the image there. So if you are working with Markdown, this is going to make your life so much easier. But if you're just even reading documentation, sometimes you just want to see what the image is. If it's a tutorial or something going step by step, now you can just hover over the link instead of having to go to preview. And this will work for videos and for images, as you can see here. And you can control click to actually open up that project. Again, it's a smaller change, but it's definitely a nice one in that regard. Now, this next one is probably going to be game changing for some people out there. And that is on extensions. So you now add extensions. You're going to notice here in my, so there's my installed, but over here in the recommended, you can notice this first guy right here. It's install Workspace Extensions. This is a new feature they've added in, so you can actually have your extensions on a workspace by workspace basis instead of just install globally to Visual Studio Code. So if you have extensions that only apply to a certain project you're working on, you can now install them locally. The process is pretty simple. All you do is basically in the root of your project like this, locate the .visual studio or the VS Code project, and then make a folder called extensions. Inside of the extensions folder, take the VSIX file of your extension, which you downloaded probably from the Visual Studio Code Marketplace, and extract it. So what you don't want to do is you don't put the VSIX inside of this folder. Instead, you put the contents in. Like here you can see I put this Dracula theme in here, and then it's ready to go. So once that's in there, you will find it available in the extensions here, recommended, and then you can install them on a workspace by workspace basis. So now you're going to see it is specific to that workspace, and I think over here, oh, it doesn't actually tell you in this list here, but you'll see at the top, it shows as a workspace extension. So uninstall it. And if you want to, since it's available locally, you're going to see, again, a special button there for how to update it. So this is going to make it easier to have per project-based configuration. And I think this is probably the biggest game changer in this particular release anyways. So that's definitely a nice new feature there. Next up, we get into a Powershell. So let's go ahead and open up a new terminal. So new terminal. So if you are using Powershell as your terminal, like so, now you've got two new features inside of the terminal. One is very specific to Powershell, and what you can do is say get, and then say O for get object or whatever, and then control space, and you will get completion. So you basically now have IntelliSense for PowerShell. So if you're working with PowerShell and you're struggling to come up with how the commands work or whatever, control space will give you auto completion for PowerShell, which is very nice. Now another neat new thing we've got here is let's just copy something. Right now you can right click to paste. Well, if you're on a Linux environment, it's normal to have terminals be middle click to paste. You can now configure that as an option. So if you want to paste into your terminal using the middle mouse button instead of the right mouse button, that is available too. So you can now customize that. And speaking of customization, they've also made it very fast to do hotkeys. So if you've got anything in the editor that is actionable, so for example, this toggle panel at the bottom, you want to change the hotkey on it, you just right click, and now you can do configure key binding, and it will bring you to the key binding setting for that one, and then you can set it to whatever you wish. So again, anything that's actionable, so right here, configure key binding. Right here, configure key binding, and it will bring you to the keyboard shortcuttings for that particular setting ready to go. So it's going to make setting up a custom keyboard bindings for customizable items a whole lot easier to work with, which is a neat new feature as well. That's not it. There's a couple of other things here as well. So again, we talked about the Markdown Preview, hover over, definitely useful there. This is another one here. So if you're working with multiple different branches, you can restore open editors seamlessly when switching between those branches, which is going to be useful for people in that particular workflow. As I mentioned earlier on, there is middle click paste support. This is a configurable option, so you do have to set it if you want it. WSL over remote SSH, accessible view. So this is for like if you're vision impaired, and it's got better support for things like screen readers, etc. So your experience there should definitely be improved if you have any kind of visual impairment to work around. Again, keyboard shortcut actions for any UI actions, just quick right click and it's available right there. Quick search, which is probably going to be the thing that people use the most. Again, just hit the palette, hit the % sign, and then whatever you're searching for, and it will search throughout your project, which is nice. And then we got two, and I think I ask this every month of you guys, and I'm curious what you think here as well. I don't think these should be part of the release notes. I think CoPilot is a separate project, and it should have its own updates. I know Microsoft are trying to sell you on CoPilot. That's how they're making money with Visual Studio Code and all that. But there's two new CoPilot features. Again, I don't think they should be part of these release notes, but I'm curious, what do you think about that? Let me know in comments down below. But we have AI-powered rename suggestions and content exclusions from the CoPilot context. If you don't want CoPilot working with a certain part of your project, you can exclude it out. And then finally, if Quick Search isn't the marquee new feature here, local Workspace Extensions probably is. So that's going to be for people with a very specific workflow, but if you want to install extensions on a per workspace basis, couldn't do it before, you can do it now. It does make for much more work involved than what you would normally see, but it is definitely it's a new feature that I think a lot of people have been asking for. And of course, we're just doing TLDR stuff. You've got other things like language models that are used for, again, CoPilot. I don't think that this should be part of the release notes here. I think that's a separate project, but that's either here nor there. So we also have another aspect here. Remember last month, they added the custom labels for tabs. So say if you're working with like index, 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 you have 5 different index file or folders of index.html or whatever open from different folders. You could have it so that it did different hover over display so you could see how it works. Well, those custom labels can now apply to quick open as well. So that was a nice new feature from last month. That's a nice improvement to it here as well. Another area they didn't really talk about earlier on here is find and trace key binding. So the find control was frequently being used unintentionally for tree controls. For example, when the find control appears in the Explorer view instead of searching in the editor. To reduce accidental activations, we have changed the default key binding for opening the find controls in the tree control to Control-Alt-F. So it's just kind of a usability issue they had before, but fixed there as well. So there's a ton of other things in here. We got a bunch of the notebook stuff. I don't really use notebooks, so I don't have much of an opinion there, but they keep making improvements to that as well. But there is a lot to this particular update on top of just what we talked about specifically. But those were, I think, the marquee new features. And I'm curious, what do you think of this update in general? Visual Studio just keeps improving at a pretty rapid pace, to be honest. So this is another impressive update. Not as impressive probably as the last couple of months. Again, the ability to finally break tabs off and move them to other screens, that was so long overdue, but that was one of the most wonderful new features. But I do love the new quick search. I do love the new local workspace extension. So they're adding features at a monthly basis that will be game changers for some people. But I'm curious what your opinion is in the comments down below. And also let me know again what you think about the CoPilot stuff being intermingled with Visual Studio Code stuff. I think it should be a separate thing. I understand why Microsoft do it, but I just think it's wrong. But I'm curious, what do you think about that? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll talk to you all later. Goodbye.